Thank you. Thanks. Привет, меня зовут Alexander. I will switch languages right away because I was born in Russia, which was like 25 years ago, and I'm actually from Barnaul. Do we have people from Barnaul here? Yeah, cool, nice, awesome. So I moved over to Germany and did my whole education in Germany and got a full-time job in Silicon Valley, and now I work for Uber. Worked for SAP in the past as an innovation manager and started working as a developer relations lead at Uber. We do tons of cool things. We have an API for developers and several products, but I will not talk about Uber today. I'll actually talk about something that's way more interesting. It's about context first. And I'll explain what that means, but essentially I will share with you guys what context platforms can teach us about great user experiences. So, today is April 1st. I haven't seen any April Fool's joke, but be aware there might be some chairs like this. Where we're headed. We are in a world where we started with mobile first maybe like 8 years ago or 9 years ago. And mobile first was the mantra that we used for a couple of years in order to introduce new products. We started with this whole responsive design and making sure that people look at the device in an appropriate manner. Now, very recently, last year, Google in 2016 said, you know what, we're actually switching over this whole thing. We're going to make something different. We will start products AI first. AI first means artificial intelligence. You have machine learning in the background, algorithms that crawl through the data and make sure they have the most accurate, the coolest knowledge they can get from you. And then they use that knowledge in order to make their products more smarter and tackle the needs that you might have. Now, I'm going to go one step ahead, and I will say the next thing will be context first. Context first means you just don't know exactly what kind of things you learn about the user, but you will make sure that you distribute it along the different contexts that you have within your life. AI first can be very, very troublesome sometimes, and I will show you some examples. So first of all, let me talk about some problems that we might have nowadays. For some people it's problems, for other people it's actually pretty good. We have many, many things that we share within a social media life. We have Facebook user likes that we share. We have so many different Uber people that take an Uber every back and forth. We have Twitter with tweets and mentions and so on and so forth. We create tons of different data, millions of different connections. And in fact, I looked it up. The Facebook button nowadays is on 2 million websites at least. I'm aware. Oh wow, that was not me. Special effects. Yeah. So we create tons of different data, and we have even social media accounts. Recent research shows that we have 2 to 5 social media accounts on average. Every average user, and I bet, how many of you guys have at least 2 accounts out of the 5 that are listed here? A couple ones? Probably everybody. Okay, everybody. Now, we deal with many different social media accounts. We create a specific persona based on that social media account, since we try to explore different opportunities to represent ourselves as a person. And we have tons of different notifications. We get data every time. It creates a lot of problems that we'll talk about later. But we create much more data as well. We create data in our car. Now, I don't know if somebody of you knows Wayray. It's actually a Russian startup. They built a device you can put in your car. It collects data from you and it analyzes all the data that it might get. It also creates some kind of a gamification thing where you get extra points if you, I don't know, start very fast, for instance, and so on and so forth. We collect data even at home. I got my Nest maybe like 5 or 6 months ago, and I literally just used it for 1 week. The cool thing about Nest is it's a device that basically disappears. Technology that you don't have to care about. You just teach it for a week, it gets my patterns, it has the CI built in, and then it does amazing things. For instance, it turns up the heater when I come back home, it uses my location from my GPS on the phone, and then everything is taken care of right away. I don't have to interact with it at all. Wow, my voice changed. So that's what we are right now. We got many, many different things. However, data is still trapped. We have data in all the different platforms, and every company owns the data. We don't really have a way to share the specific data. There was one time, I think a couple of years ago, everybody was saying that Web 3.0 will be the next thing. The semantic web where people share things and you understand the data about the data. So you basically have this metadata where you connect. However, it never happened. Semantic web never happened, and everybody owns the specific data. Another problem is that AI first obviously makes data crucial for you. It's some kind of a competitive advantage if you know more things about your users, which is why you probably don't want to share the data. So we're living in this other world as well. Now, with all the notifications you get, you have to make decisions all the time. And one thing that you might be experiencing is that you make tons of different decisions and it takes you so much time. It's like super inefficient. You don't know exactly why you spend so much time at it. But in fact, it boils down to one specific thing. You're making tons of decisions every day. In fact, research studies show that you make 35,000 decisions each and every day. It might sound crazy, but it's actually pretty easy to navigate through this whole thing. On average, a user gets 20 to 100 notifications. Each notification on your phone is at least one decision. Open or swipe. If you open, multiple more decisions again. And now, another great example is actually if you think about food. Throughout the day, you probably will take care you will focus much more on like healthy food in the morning, and you will make decisions about like what to eat and what might be the best one. But at the end of the day, you actually don't care too much. If you ever experience that, it's called Hicks' Law. Hicks' Law means the more decisions you make over the day, the less quality they would have, because you don't care. You just have too many decisions to make, and at some point, you just don't care too much anymore. The decision quality decreases the more you have, which gives us something that's called decision fatigue. Now, decision fatigue is something that was created basically by the data we create every day. An important thing to know is, in a world where AI is first, we have tons of different data created, and you don't know exactly what to look at. The problem is you cannot identify what might be relevant. If somebody of you actually figured out what's relevant on the slide, I can show you. It's this. Algorithms help us to understand the data by blanking out other things. They help you to focus on very specific aspects. However, the same algorithms also create something that's called filter bubble. Filter bubble is essentially something, he's laughing. Filter bubble is essentially something that uses your pattern in the past, and based on the pattern, it extrapolates and tries to anticipate what you might be looking at. However, if you never looked for maybe my profile and you never looked about like my language preferences and how I switched back from like Russian to German to English, you would not see that because your pattern in the past did not really care about that. So a filter bubble is created whenever you express certain needs and certain wishes to a product learns about it, and then the AI will basically say, okay, the next thing that Alex will care about is only that, but they will neglect other things. And that's called filter bubble. There's like a very, very prominent example in the US right now. I don't know if you ever followed like the US elections with Donald Trump being president. It's very, very interesting. In fact, something that came up and Facebook was actually sued about this is because Facebook shows only relevant data based on your preferences. It bubbles out everything else that you wouldn't care. Democrats just saw Democratic things. Republicans just saw Republican content, which means they never intersected. They never thought there will be a world of Trump for a Democrat. They didn't know there's like this big community because all their profiles indicated, I just care about Democrats. I see Democrats all the time. It will be no surprise. And then yet it was. So we can do much, much better with a context platform, I think. Let me explain to you what a context platform might mean. We live in a world where there's different contexts that shape an intent that you might have a specific time. It's called the life context. That's what we say. You might commute to work with your train, or you might go shopping, or you might search for something very specific. And it's a very specific context in your life. For instance, I usually commute with the carpool, and then I look through my emails while commuting, and then I go through all the steps at work. And based on my context in my life, in my day-to-day, I only care about so much of the products. I don't care about all the features maybe of a product, but only about a very limited set. Now, the problem is products don't really care about life context at this point. What happens is designers usually create this one UI that should work for every user, and do tons of user research. However, they don't anticipate that your contexts change, and they're not adapting in real time. Obviously, what works for one user will probably not work for a different user because they have different life contexts they go through each and every day. And then on top of that, every user would probably have differences in their life context on a day-to-day basis. Over the weekend, you will care about other stuff that you will care during the week. Now, we need to change that. We need to anticipate an intent. We need to anticipate what people look for in their specific life context. And we need to make it visible. Now, in this specific slide, I want to point out something very important. It's the transportation context. The only way we don't crash every day, sometimes we probably do, the only way we don't crash every day is because we show the intent on the streets. We show where we're going with our car. We're using our car signal to indicate we're going left. Everybody around us adapts to that because it's a normal pattern. We need to have the same thing for products. We need to create a context platform that anticipates these needs and shows the needs at lifetime so other products can adapt to that. Very specific example is if you have a product and you have a user. This is your user over here. Let's call her Anna. Anna has a specific user state, and that's the whole context that you know about Anna. It might be profile details, account, transactions, and so on and so forth. Now Anna, on a specific screen, if she's looking at something, she might have 3 different intents. You don't know exactly what she would like to do. So what you do is you have a smart UX engineer, UX designer, they do tons of research, they figure out there are 3 different things Anna would like to care at this specific screen. But you need to anticipate what she cares about most. So you're trying to figure out what intent it might be. Is it A, B, or C? You don't know. Now what you do is with additional context that you might get somewhere else, third party, you understand that one thing, one feature might be more relevant than any other feature. And this context obviously changes all the time. That's what I was telling about the live context. Now, we currently have that. You might say, well, that's actually not a surprise. I know that, I'm using different contexts already. I already understand what's happening. So what's the new thing that you're talking about? Now, I think what we're currently talking about is legacy context. We have different contexts that we can use. For instance, location, HTTP, and browser. And those things, to be very specific, give us some data about the user. And we use that as a context right now. For instance, we know what platform they're running on. We know if it's a touch, so we know it's probably a mobile device or like a tablet. We know their time zone, we have some IP addresses, and we kind of use that legacy context that's already there for years. Now, I'm saying the new context will be given from third-party platform, from third-party context platform, and it will happen during real time. Let me give you an example. Google Inbox. Somebody of you guys using Google Inbox? Oh, a few, okay, not bad, cool. If you order something and you'll get notifications in your inbox about the delivery, what Google Inbox will do is actually they'll crawl through your email, they will extract and identify that you have a delivery email address, the delivery email received, and then they will figure out when the delivery is. So they're using this third-party context that's coming from somewhere else, from the delivery provider, and then they say, well, basically, I will give you another option in the UI, and it will tell you, you can deliver this whole thing and snooze my email until the day of the delivery based on this additional context I have. Another sample, very basic, and we talked about GitHub today already, so here it is. Project context. If you type in license, GitHub will anticipate that you actually, in your project context, you're creating a new repository, and within that, you usually have just one licensing file, and that one licensing file usually follows a specific template, MIT, Apache, and so on and so forth. So while you type, they realize you're actually looking for that thing, and then they propose or anticipate this action for you. Another more advanced one, and that's my favorite actually, Google Photos. If you upload some Google Photos in your, on your online profile, what they'll do is they will go through your images, they will collect some metadata, but they also have like pattern recognition mechanisms implemented, which means every picture, they understand actually what the context of the picture is. And they, based on that, they suggest you relevant search indications. So on top of here, you will see wedding, which refers to the wedding that I had 2 years ago. And they basically figure out, if I were to refresh this page, they would suggest something else. Based on the metadata they extract from my pictures, there's some AI going on in the background, they suggest something that's relevant for you specifically in your context. And that's something that I think is pretty smart and what we should go into as like a product landscape. Now, why would we care now? Why not like 5 years ago or like 10 years ago? Certain developments made it happen. Of course, we have IoT, we have tons of different sensors left and right. It's much, much cheaper now. We have many more devices connected to the internet. With IP version 6, now everything can be connected. We can get an IP address for every atom on the world. And we have something that allows you to securely expose parts of your profile. Now with OAuth 2.0, you can say that a user will give access to a product for the specific scope. For instance, like a history or just, I don't know, maybe just like pictures or something. In 2014, we reached the milestone as well. We can now query 1.2 terabyte query within 10 seconds. So this whole data that we create, we can actually analyze at some point. Another thing that made it happen is microservices. In 2015, I think the whole movement started with microservices, and this book came out. I think it was the very first book about microservices. Essentially allows you to have small encapsulated services that provide business value each and every time. The huge benefit is, and I think that's why we need to have those things in place, if you expose context, you can just have one microservice that exposes that, and every other microservice does other things. So it's a very minimal effort that you can have nowadays. It's not like a huge software project you need to take care of. 2015, the age of AI, we have Google that open source their machine learning platform. They have something they provide for you so you can apply their algorithms and make sure that you can extract data and meaning from what you collected. So all of a sudden, it's kind of fairly easy for you to get started with AI, even though you're not like a Google and have thousands of engineers just doing AI thing. And the very, very latest movement is anticipatory design. I'll talk about it for quite a while. I think anticipatory design is very important. It's a new concept that came out, that Huge Inc. came up a few, I think, months ago. Unfortunately, it turned out that Huge Inc. used this more or less as like a marketing thing. But there's a movement going on for anticipatory design currently, and there are many, many people doing studies around this. I think the main values are actually very important, and they encapsulate what I want to talk about. It's the user that you have using your product will not care about all the choices they have most of the time. They want to have a simplified interaction. They want you to understand what they're looking for, and you should anticipate what kind of choices you might give them. So I'll talk about that a bit more later. 2017, we're in the age of real-time, and we have real-time APIs available. Unfortunately, only 200, which is like 1% of all the API landscapes. But we're getting more and more real-time APIs out there, I think fairly soon. I think real-time APIs are very important for this whole context platform because you will probably look at the context of your user during real time. Like if they check out an order on the website and the next screen, you would want to know what they might care about most, which is why you need to have API calls happening at that time in real time. Now there's certain key concepts I would like to talk about if we have if we have enough time. I believe we have enough time. So the user state over here, I already said Anna has a user state. It includes account history, interactions, maybe the screen they're looking at, and their preferences and profiles. On top of that, we have a live context. A live context is something they care about right now. For instance, Anna is carpooling right now with an Uber, and then their live context is she just cares about, the specific things, maybe in the car, maybe she talks to the driver, maybe she goes on social media profiles, which most people usually do. It's a very situation-specific context where you know what the user might be looking for. Usually you obtain those through real-time agents. And I'll talk about agents because it's fairly interesting right now what's happening in this whole chatbot and conversational commerce development because they're highly relevant for this specific topic. So live context usually determines what kind of intent you might be looking for. Over here we have the user intent, which is what the user would like to do on a specific screen. Very situational, and in order to understand that, you need to have this whole specific context provided by somebody. You usually anticipate this user intent, but you don't make a decision. You just try to be very upfront. You don't make a decision. You just provide them with like the most, hopefully, most reasonable screen. Now, the whole big connection is the context agent. A context agent connects to specific products. It's basically a bridge between different products. It uses the live context and executes some actions. For instance, you could connect to the Uber API as live context, and you can actually order an Uber right away. Or you could understand that somebody's taking a ride during the real time, and they have like 20 minutes in their car, and based on that, you can basically anticipate within your product what they might be looking for. And we have really, really cool examples like Auto Radio, essentially a podcast station that figures out that you're on an Uber and then gives you content just for the ride of your Uber. Like if you're in an Uber for 20 minutes, you will get the webcast station just for 20 minutes and not like 50 or 80 or something. Now agents are essentially just libraries and they map to context. There could be many more agents per one context. If you carpool, you could also have the Lyft API and Uber API, Yandex, and whatever not. Those agents would be still part of the same context because it just depends on what the users use most within your product. And I'll talk about that a bit more later. So here's an example. Here's why I think agents are super relevant right now. Everybody talks about chatbots right now. Conversational e-commerce is apparently a boom right now. And actually in our team, we had Chris Messina who anticipated that conversational e-commerce will pick up big times. And that was in, I believe, 2015. And he developed the very first personal chatbot as well. Here it is. A chatbot is essentially just a context agent. It connects to the Facebook platform. It uses a different third-party product, accumulates the data, and then based on that, figures out in what context you might be and shows you the most relevant thing. This is very important. They're just an instance of those agents. And anticipatory design is basically an enabler for that, which means at each point during your chat, your bot anticipates what the next important thing might be. So it's basically AI running in the background, trying to figure out what you're telling this whole chatbot, and then you represent some actions or some responses to this. The key element to this is agents are not limited to UIs. They can be, you can just speak to them. You can maybe just chat with them. A context agent is a very abstract mechanism to deal with different contexts in life. And this one is actually a pretty cool example. You can check into your flights, and then if your flight is late, they will automatically apply for like reimbursement, because some companies offer you reimbursement if your flights are late, and this solution just does that automatically. Anticipatory design, I talked about it quite a while. Here are the three main mechanisms. You start with IoT, you have some data generated in some sensors. You use that data and apply machine learning to understand the meaning of the data, and then you use that meaning in order to filter your UX design and make sure you show just the most relevant things. So 3 key principles. Simplify interaction, minimize options, and try to hit the max use cases you can. And then anticipate choices, but do not make decisions. Favorite quote that applies fairly easy to this: you should try to figure out what's the most simple thing, but do not make it simpler than that. So if you just remove everything and the user has no choice, they will not be happy. And there's a ton of discussion around that going on in this whole anticipatory movement, which is if you move away choices from the users, you essentially move away, you remove their freedom to some degree, because we have people that really care about this whole exploration space, and if they go through a process in your product, they actually like to go through that process. They are curious, they would like to learn something, and they would like to have choices. Now there are those people, and you have to anticipate that too. Very quickly, we have a few more minutes, so I will talk about the first steps that you need to do in order to become context-driven. Segmenting your user base, change your UX approach, build smart algorithms, and build a context architecture to use the different context platforms. First, segmentation. You need to figure out what kind of users you might have. Now, as I already said, in the back, well, not really in the days earlier, right now, still, designers do tons of different user research. They create segments, they create personas, they might have like a point of view and everything, and then based on that, they try to anticipate what users would like to care about. The problem, though, is they do that one time. They do that when you create your product. Now, the change to context platforms is this whole thing will happen in real time. Nowadays, with this whole context platform idea, your designers would create segments and live context, and based on that, they will provide a different set of UIs. And during lifetime, your product should figure out what UI is the most relevant. So the decision the designers were making one time during the production is now being made in real time with the AI. And the designers basically filter and give them what kind of input might be available. So it's a huge transition, but I think this is where we're going, and this is what we'll see in the future much, much more. Anticipatory design is only relevant if you can actually predict some things. So this one is quite interesting. If you cannot get it right, and it's actually quite expensive to get it wrong, you should probably not do anticipatory design. So what you're really aiming for is this one here. And the only way to get there is through AI. You can only know as much as you will get from the data and maybe the user research that you did with your designers. So anticipatory design is only possible if there's a low cost of being wrong. Because if you provide the wrong option, Well, your user is probably stuck. That's why you should not make decisions. You should only anticipate what it is. Next thing you might want to care about is smart algorithms. There are 4 different things that I think are super relevant. In order to overcome the filter bubble, you need to have responsive algorithms, basically allowing your algorithm to teach it. This is something we don't have at all right now. If you like something on the Facebook wall or whatever on the Facebook feed, sorry, wall is gone already a few years ago. If you use the Facebook feed and you like, I don't know, things from one friend, the next time you open up Facebook, it will be only that specific friend that you will see updates about. And there's no way for you to change the algorithm. So there's no way to teach what you actually care about. Maybe just in this one life context, you just wanted to like something because you were with a friend. But, that's not your life. You don't care about this one person every time in your life. So it's important to have this enabled. Transparency as well. Always say why your algorithm predicted something. Always explain why a decision was made. Amazon does that fairly well. If they have products that other people were buying, they explain why. They show you what you bought in the past, and that's why their algorithm shows the specific thing. Intelligent is very important. You should not conflate action with intent. Action, for instance, means my Nest knows I'm close to home. What it does not know, I might just shop at the store next by. So they would use this action as my intent to go back home and actually activate my Nest, which is not true. And that's happening quite a while. For instance, if you buy on Amazon and you look for TVs, you buy a TV. Next time you open up Amazon, you will actually see still TV suggestions, even though you already bought one and you don't care about it anymore. Fail-safe, obviously also very, very important. Make sure that if in real time you cannot get that context, your UI should still look appropriate enough so that people can interact with it. Now here's a bit more explanation how context architecture could look like. There are 2 ways you can obtain context. One is through a third-party platform, over here. Essentially, a user is using something, maybe they took an Uber ride, and then you understand there's a live context, and this specific product will notify you. They will send you some data and basically say, hey, one of your users is taking an Uber right now. Do you want to do something with that? And then it's up to you to figure out what kind of state your user might be caring about within your product. For instance, now this is a different example. Somebody checked in somewhere and you get this notification. You need to figure out how to use the specific context in your product and based on that show the right UI and the appropriate actions. Other way around, you have a context, somebody's using your product, and you actually obtain additional data from a third-party platform. For instance, you have a user and you want to figure out where this user is. You basically call maybe a different platform. If it's Uber, you could actually know where they are if they're on the right, and then you get the latitude and longitude for the specific user. Now, there are certain challenges, obviously. We are in a world where people still don't trust data, and there are different reasons for that. They are very, very important. First of all, in order to do all of this, data is paramount. If you don't have data, it's going to be pretty hard to anticipate anything. Real-time APIs are needed because your context will be expanded during real time. You have enough data about the users to understand what they might care about, but you need to much, much more in real time. And then trust in algorithms and privacy does not really work nowadays. People don't trust companies. They don't know exactly what they're doing with the data, who has access to it, who's actually reusing it, how is it used within your algorithms, how is it displayed. They have no idea because companies do not really publicly share this whole information. And then the last thing, anticipate, don't decide because you're taking away freedom from the users. Here's something very important. One sentence, if somebody would ask me what the one sentence is that I would like to sum it up, it's this. Context platforms change not how we interact with devices, but how devices interact with us. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay.
Well,
I actually have a question. Thank you for your speech. It was really amazing, and I always wonder how powerful and how smart things can be. How far can the AI accompanied with context can go. But I think that the only way for improvement is through exercise, which is actually getting tired. And coming to the question of decision-making fatigue,
Yeah.
I think there might be some danger if we don't let people make decisions.
Correct.
They actually stop evolving.
Yes.
Do you
for sure.
think people will stay actually humans when this, on the long run, expand everywhere?
Yeah, this is something that people usually talk about, and that's one of the main questions. I think, here's the thing. Based on your life context, you know if you actually care about decisions or not. Sometimes you want to explore something, sometimes you actually care about like the process, and you're curious about stuff, you want to learn new stuff, but there's some life contexts where you would not care about the details. And that's where distinguishness is. You need to anticipate, but do not make decisions for them. And only in specific context it will be beneficial. But a valid point, definitely. This whole thing is actually based on very, very recent research, and we're just trying to, spearhead this whole thing. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, sure, thanks.
Any other question in the back? Oh, here.
Can you share more examples, companies who are using this approach? Because it sounds like now we need 10 times more designers in our team.
I don't think you need 10 times more designers in your team. I think your designers would just need to allow options in the beginning. What happens throughout the design process is naturally you will design for a couple of users. Sorry, that's a bit loud. You will design for a couple of users, and you will naturally have some options of your UI, and you would need to figure out, based on that, what your UI should look like. So you have just one UI. However, the other options are basically neglected. With this, I'm saying leave the options and decide during real time what's happening. Is that answering your question? Kinda? Ask me another one. Yes.
Alexander, what about danger of sharing the whole life context? What you're talking about, it's not only about trust. In ideal situation, you're talking about the world where almost anybody can get not just personal data, not just current context, virtually the whole life of any person.
Yeah, that's a very, very important thing that we probably need to explore and find the right boundaries throughout this whole procedure, I think. We don't have any, I don't think Uber is the real context platform. I don't think there's actually a real context platform right there, right now available. I think Facebook Messenger with the chatbots, it's getting pretty close to it. But I think what's important is that you should not expose too much data. You should expose intent, but not maybe all the details of the data. For instance, if you're developing a chatbot for Facebook Messenger, you can receive webhooks about certain things like a new message came in, or I'm writing this one guy, or somebody read my messages. And those are the intents that I think are most important. If you use Uber, we have as well webhooks that basically send you notification if the user approves them. And I think in order to get more adoption and feel like a critical mass for the specific context platform, you need to have security mechanisms in place like OAuth. I don't know if you ever used OAuth, but they essentially allow you to, basically they ask your users if it's okay to expose that specific scope of your profile, and they will explain right away in like legal terms, this will send a webhook if you take an Uber ride. And then they would have to accept that. I think what we need to do as a next step, because that's what people basically have as a basic implementation, the next step to make this work is to allow people to control this data over the lifespan. Because most of the time, say if you accept it once, people just don't give you an option to actually change your opinion or make it like revertible.
But at that moment when somebody gives, approves the right to send those webhooks, user won't even know who will receive them.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. We need to have best practices in place where your user profile basically lists how many webhooks you're sending, what kind of platforms you're connected to, and they allow you to disconnect right away. That's what it should be. It should be like an easy option for you to see right away how many webhooks are being sent.
Which platform, but not which end system?
It can go both ways. At the end, what you'll have if you do auth, you will have an access token, and you can invalidate that access token from both sides. I think the easiest is to have it within your product and basically say, hey, my user profile, certain things from your profile are exposed to other platforms, or you connect with other platforms, and then you can basically say disconnect. That's what I think it should be. Unfortunately, the auth standards, like the implementation and specification, is very open-minded. It doesn't really tell you that you should have like the best practices where people can easily disconnect and invalidate token. That's just not there. I think it's up to us to make this this next step.
Thank you.
Sure.
Кажется, нам нужен вопрос с этой стороны.
Go ahead.
Давай.
User context and have... В общем, я по-русски лучше, наверное, спрошу, потому что очень тяжело сформулировать. Есть контекст людей, которые достаточно известны и популярны. И возможно ли применение этого контекста в рамках отдельного человека? Ну, допустим, очень популярная персона — это Стив Джобс. Его привычки какие-то использовать в приложениях или в уведомлениях для того, чтобы человек хотел себя поступить точно так же, как другой человек, например, да? Есть ли такие у вас мысли?
Yeah, so to repeat what I understood, sorry, my Russian is not that good anymore. I understood that you're saying there might be prominent people that you maybe admire and you want to figure out how their life context is, and based on the insights from their profile, you would like to figure out how you could be a bit more like them. Is that right? Kinda? Not? So you're trying... Clarify, just let me know what you ask. Can you let him clarify quickly, if there's anything... Okay, expert zone. I'll talk all about it, but I think it's very, very interesting. There are some platforms that do specifically that. If you, for instance, go on Amazon and you've never bought something, you look at a product, it will say, here's what other people bought together with this product. And essentially, they avoid the decision that you would need to make. They basically tell you there are people who already made this decision. They bought something, and their next decision was that. So you basically learn based on other people's profile, even though Amazon does not really have your context in the specific product area. Sorry.
Hello, thanks for your speech. It's really amazing, and it's I think it's very inspiring too. And my question is maybe not directly connected to the speech, but you talked a lot about technical specialities or some changes, some shift that is driven by this new context architecture. Can you say anything about maybe some shift that is required from person like analysts, persons that write requirements that are in testing area, or what should be changed for them maybe from your point of view?
I think this is a perfect question, and I couldn't focus on the details during this talk, but if you have multiple UI options, you have to store somehow the state of your UI and what users look at specific points. But then testing becomes more complicated because you have a set of different UIs and you need to figure out how to test that. And I think from an analyst perspective, it's also about the data that you get in addition, and you need to look at the specific context. So I think what's important, what I couldn't talk about here is, right now there might be only 4 or 5 actual feasible context platforms. Reason being is, whenever you look for additional context, you need to connect to some other platform. So at this point, your users are required to have a different account somewhere, probably with some history, which means you're going for the biggest platforms in order to make sure that the users have an account. So at that point, you need to have an overlap of your user base and their user base, and that's why only like the bigger context platforms might be relevant. But I have a whole full-fledged like step-by-step guide of how to approach context. Essentially, you need to figure out the intents users might have, how the live context changed them, and what variables would help you to figure out how to anticipate this intent. So there's certain things that you would like to have to understand the user specifically, but then if you look at context platforms, they don't really provide you that. So you need to have like a mashup of different attributes to come closer to their concept. Yeah. This is just like an inspirational talk. I think we're very much in the beginning of this development.
So the last question.
Before I talk that sometimes you shouldn't decide for users, because users want to do it by themselves because he enjoy make a decision and want more options, more choice. So how don't make when the product should make decision for users, or when they don't need to do it?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. How many options do you provide the user at a specific time? And how do you figure if you should actually provide only one or like 3 different things? It's all based on how much you can predict. And I think the most important graph that I would refer to is, where is it? This one diagonal here. If you cannot figure out enough context about the user, stick to the standard UI or the standard interface, but try not to anticipate, because you're basically saying there might be a high cost involved in anticipating the user's intent, but then if it's wrong, they don't know what to do. And that's something you should avoid at all costs. So only go for anticipatory design and like having only one button maybe for the action if you know enough context. And I guess it's just up to us to figure out what kind of products might be relevant in this area. But right now it's mainly dictated by how many context platforms we have and what are the things they actually currently expose. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, time to say thanks to Alexander.
Thank you.
Thank you.